Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome back again. This is Josh Cantwell, CEO at Strategic Real Estate Coach and Freeland Ventures Real Estate Private Equity. I am extremely excited today to be with you for another edition, another episode of Strategic Real Estate Coach Radio, where you've heard from not only myself and other industry experts, but industry titans like Barbara Corcoran, Jack Canfield, Kevin O'Leary, and today I'm again, excited about our guests that we were able to secure for today's interview, and we're really excited to have him on. His name is Dr. Peter Linneman. Dr. Peter Linneman is an industry titan as well. He is a professor emeritus from the Wharton School of Business, Real Estate and Finance. He's authored textbooks and training programs for university, specifically on real estate investing, real estate finance, as well as how to evaluate opportunities and risks in real estate. And we're very excited to have him not only on today's program, but also as one of our keynote speakers at our upcoming Flip and Fund Summit. So Dr. Linneman, we're going to call him Peter today. How are you doing today? And what's new in real estate? What's going on in your market?
Well, the most important thing as a longtime Philadelphia resident is that the Eagles are Super Bowl champions, and we had the parade yesterday. So that's the most important thing in life right now, or the happiest thing in life. We'll talk about real estate, commercial real estate. Actually, let me start with single family, if I might, first, because we mostly will focus, I suspect, on commercial, but single family is a very interesting sector. Single family housing is still being massively underproduced. It's being held back by one simple phenomena, and that is that the Fed's hyper low interest rates for the last decade have robbed people of any income on their safe savings. And I think of safe savings as checking accounts, 6-month to 2-year CDs. And if you think about where normal people, don't think of rich people, normal people put their money while they're building up a down payment, they're putting it in that type of stuff. Well, a zero interest rate by the Fed just robbed those people of any return on their money, and it meant they had to save that much longer to come up with a down payment. It also meant that real people, think of a grandmother who's 70 years old a decade ago with $400,000 in life savings, all in 6 months to 2-year CDs. And you say, well, normally that woman would have been getting on 400,000, say 3% a year, 4% a year, $12,000 to $16,000 on her life savings for the last 10 years. As a result of the Fed's low interest rate policy, that woman has gotten zero on her life savings. Zero. What would that woman have done at the age of 70? She's now 80. What would she have done with that? Well, Grandma would have given a little to Susie to help her out with her down payment. She'd have given a little to grandson Billy to help him out with a down payment. And she hasn't had that money to help on the down payment. And probably as many as 40% of all buyers of homes, and probably about 95% of all people under the age of 40 rely on those kind of transfer payments. And when the Fed lowered the interest rate, not only did it take longer for somebody to get the necessary down payment on their own money, but it also meant grandma, and I'm putting a face on it with grandma. Obviously, it's a general statement of anybody who relied on short-term safe savings as their way they save, not hedge funds, not real estate, not just 6-month to 2-year CDs. They had no income. And in fact, the way that the transfer occurred for those is only when grandma died and made the distribution did the grandchild get a little bit of money. And that's why you're slowly seeing, over time, the single-family housing market get more demand. But you need a down payment. It's not about the monthly. Everybody thinks it's about the monthly. You're going to pay a monthly either in an apartment or in your home. And as you know, the monthly is not so cheap in apartments these days in
Right.
most markets. It's the down payment, and that is what was wiped out by the zero interest rate policy. And in fact, as interest rates rise, you're going to get and short-term interest rate, right? That's the 6 months to year kind of interest rate. As that rises, you're not surprisingly seeing people get more income on their savings, and you're going to see more happening. That sector has been so misunderstood by policymakers that yes, low interest rates may boost home prices a bit, but that just makes it more difficult for the person who's saving to buy the home. And it means they've got no money for the down payment anyway. So this has been a very misplayed effort on behalf of the Fed, at least in terms of single family housing. As a result, I'll transition. As a result, what normally is a sector that is in excess at this point in the cycle, with 200,000 or 300,000 more homes than normal being produced at this point in the cycle, we're still a couple 100,000 below normal. If there's a silver lining in that, it means that that still is a sector that is going to power the economy forward for the next couple of years. People need homes. We have a shortfall of about almost 3 million single-family homes over the last 15 years. And so that is a powerful force on the economy. I don't know if you have any question you might want to ask on that, and then I'll move over to commercial if you will.
I do, Peter. And the question really relates to those people who are investing in real estate. There's a couple new phenomenons as well that have happened since the Great Recession. One is that you're starting to see a lot of markets, some data providers. One of my good friends is a vice president at Realty Track or Atom Data Solutions. And they're starting to see some markets, what they refer to as getting into bubble territory. Places like San Francisco or Seattle or, back to Nevada, Arizona, some of the same exact areas that were part of this bubble back in 2007, 8, 9 when that burst. And so you have these interesting factors going on. One is that we don't have enough single family real estate. We're 3 million units short. We need builders to build more units. That's one factor. You have all these millennials that are delaying home ownership and are stopped now moving into, getting married and buying homes and having children later in life. And then you have this other factor, which is that financing for single family investment properties from companies like mine, my private equity fund, or Colony America Finance. There's so much more real estate funding out there. 10, 15 years ago, Peter, there was only Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and everybody had to get a loan from them, and they limited you to the number of loans you could get. Today, there's all this alternate real estate finance for both residential and commercial, and the numbers just don't seem to add up. Do you have a take on how these things are all impacting each other?
Well, you mentioned the Colony Homes and the Starwoods and the Blackstones on the single family front, and smaller guys, who have bought anywhere from 10 to 1,000 homes, right, and renting them out. If you think about it, all they've done is provide the down payment.
Sure.
Because that's all they did. They provided the down payment that the person didn't have. They're charging them a monthly, right? The monthly is not so different. They have to borrow money. The people have to borrow money. And in fact, the Blackstones and Colonies, the borrowing rate is higher for them than it is if you got an individual mortgage, non-recourse, interestingly. So somebody's got to pay for that debt. Somebody's got to pay for the property taxes. Somebody's got to cover the operating costs. That's a wash, whether you're the owner or Blackstone's the owner. What Blackstone did is provide the down payment that the Fed made impossible for people to come up with.
Wow, that's an interesting take on that.
It really highlights the issue. It really highlights the issue of what there was not a shortage of demand for housing, there was a shortage of capital available for down payment. And as you point out, these alternate sources appeared, and they're out there. And they're going to need to be out there until people build up the down payment, which is going to require interest rates to move back, short-term interest rates to move back to normal. By normal, if you've got a 2% inflation, normal is going to be 2.5% to 3.5% on the short end. Again, 6 months to 2 year CDs kind of is where I have in mind. So you're right, there are a lot of alternatives. And, it's funny, we thought of ourselves as landlords, but what we really were is in the finance business of providing the down payment, but we didn't do it by a mortgage. We did it by, I want the upside of the housing recovery. Sure. And what happened was you have about 1.5 million people who got no benefit of the upside of the housing recovery because they didn't have the down payment. And that was a real phenomenon. That was a very real phenomenon.
And how, Peter, do you anticipate the market unfolding over the next couple of years? Because the Fed seems to be indicating there might be 3 Fed rate hikes this year, maybe in Q2, Q3, and Q4. Rates are going to start to creep up a little bit. How is that going to impact things over the next couple of years?
Short rates going up is a good thing. Short rates going up is a good thing. It gets them closer to market rates. It gets them closer to sending the right kind of signals exactly in the way we're talking about. It gives people more money for down payment. It'll feed the single-family demand. Now, it's not going to happen overnight because grandmother isn't going to go from a decade of no income to now she's got $442 and say, yippee. Right. It's going to take a while to break through psychological barriers and emotional barriers and so forth. But it will feed the single-family housing market, which will feed the U.S. economy. And I'm not worried about short rates going up until they get above sort of 3.5%. And because I think the market rate is in the range of 2.5% to 3.5%. Nobody knows, but that's my gut. And moving it up towards the market rate, I believe in market rates giving good signals and improving an economy. When interest rates increase are dangerous is when they go above market rates, not as they go to market rates. And we're in an environment where the interest rates going up are going to market rates, which send better signals and are more efficient. When the Fed pushes them above market rates is when it can choke off an economy.
Got it. So when people are talking about, well, the Fed raising rates are going to slow things down, real estate will slow down, you hear the talking heads on TV mentioning that. Your take is that that's helping us get to normalcy. It's helping us improve the economy. But like you said, once we get over that 3.5, and it's above market rate is when it can cause trouble and choke things off.
Absolutely. And if you and it makes common sense. I mean, do you really think the Fed has divine wisdom on where interest rates should be? Of course not. And by the way, if they were that good, we ought to put them in charge of setting all prices for everything in the economy. Well, the reason we don't do that is we know that market prices are not perfect, but they're better at creating growth and efficiency than mandarins deciding. And what we've had for the last decade are not only mandarins deciding the short-term interest rate and to some extent the long-term interest rate, we've had them set it at unnaturally low rates like we've never seen, and we've had unnaturally low growth. It's cause and effect. It's part of the problem. It's not part of the cure. And reminds me of, I live very close to where Benjamin Rush, who was a famous physician, signed the Declaration and the Constitution, was one of the founders of Pennsylvania Hospital, which was the first hospital in the United States. And one of his great skills is he was a great bleeder, and he would bleed you until you got better. Well, we know today that was an enormous mistake. Not that he was ill-intended, but it was an enormous mistake. And I think that's what history will someday look back on, the prolonged, abnormal, non-market, low interest rates. It was done in good faith. It was done to believing they were helping the economy, but in fact, it was hurting the economy.
Got it. That's interesting. I really appreciate that take because I think so many people assume that the operators inside of the Fed and the operators inside of our government have this crystal ball and they know exactly what's going to happen and they can just pull these levers and they're always right. And I appreciate hearing a more common sense approach from you and knowing that these people are not wizards sitting behind some magic green door with every answer. They're doing the best they can.
It's much more like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Where they're doing the best and they're trying to pull a lot of levers, but they don't know. They're just normal human beings doing the best they can. And when you deviate from the market, especially if you deviate from market very long, it drags on the economy. This is a lesson all society has learned in any number of environments. These are just normal human beings. I know some of them over the years. A couple of them over the years I wouldn't have let balance my checkbook.
That's great.
Not that they're not trying to do a wonderful job. It's just, come on, they're just human beings. They don't have divine insight on the right interest rate. They don't have a model that says the right interest rate. And effectively what we've had for the last decade is a Fed that believes they're smarter than markets. And the outcome has been slower growth than norm. You make your own judgment of cause and effect.
Got it. So do you have a take on the single family market? I know a lot of people are starting to see that there is more of this alternate finance where not only is Colony America, Starwood, not only did they buy tens of thousands of rentals, but they also are now providing loans to real estate investors, real estate operators to buy and do fix and flips or rental properties or portfolios of rentals or lines of credit. There's all this alternate funding available, not just ownership and rentals, but funding. And we're seeing now, again, according to Adam Data Solutions, the largest number of real estate investments being funded with financing. And I think what I'm getting at, Peter, is that pushing the residential or single family market into a bubble?
It's filling the gap. It's filling that gap that I'm talking about on the down payment, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about filling the gap. If you think about it from a social point of view, though, you can see why it's good that this alternative money is developed, because the alternative would have been a total gap, right? So I'm not saying that filling the gap hasn't been a good thing, but it's easy to see how it's been a drag on the economy that such money was needed. And it's very easy to see. Blackstone, Colony, et cetera, you or I as an investor, we want a 15 to 20% return on our equity.
Sure.
And the debt is costing about 5%. If you think about if you personally went to buy a home to live in, you historically have been happy to get about a 5 to 7% return on your equity, and you can borrow at 4.5 or 3.5%. That means the cost of capital is massively higher for this sector than it's ever been. And not ever. I mean, it would have been even higher if these guys hadn't filled the gap. But you can see why it's a drag on the economy if instead of a 5 or 6% cost of capital for the homeowner, which is traditional, you now have on a blended basis some number in the 10%. You go, oh, that's why there's less single-family homes being produced. It's just that simple.
Sure.
So I think all these gaps that are being filled are great, and they're making the world better. But what would be even better is if the Fed let market rates occur on the short end, people went back to the way they normally financed, you'd get more activity, there'd be more jobs, there'd be more people building homes and moving firms and title company searches and all that kind of stuff. And it's happening. It's just happening very slowly.
Sure. Now, I know your publication, the Linneman Letter, is read throughout the globe on real estate, United States real estate. I know you focus primarily on commercial in that letter, but there are leading companies throughout the world that rely on that. For those people in our audience who don't know what that is, tell us a little bit more about the Linneman Letter. What is it there to do, and why are you so passionate for it? Because I know it's your baby.
Yeah, we've been doing it about, I don't know, time flies, I think 16 years or so. We put it out quarterly. I write long letters. It's well over 100 pages. It's rich in data. I don't know if anybody relies on it, but I know a lot of people read it and use it to help form their thoughts and to question their own strategies. And in a funny way, I think that's its most valuable, is to provide information, not just data, but information and thoughts that challenge your thinking as a decision maker. It's not that I have a unique insight. I'm no smarter than the guys at the Fed. I just told you I don't have a great answer. But I think I'm pretty good at raising questions and making clear why I think a certain way so that you as a reader can cross your thinking and your strategy and say, well, I think he's crazy because, or I think he's right, or I hadn't thought of that, or he's. So I think it's really more as a challenger to how you're thinking about things and opening your mind to a few things you might not have thought about. We've been doing it now, I think, about 17 years. It's been very satisfying. It's an odd mixture of economics, actually quite sophisticated, try to make it simple, of capital markets, of real estate supply demand fundamentals, of transaction prices. And then we also always try to have a couple of interesting odd topics like the state of education or something big that affects our society, inequality. And we'll put little pieces in so you don't just get your head down nothing but real estate. I think people enjoy that as well.
Sure.
And so it's in an odd way. Imagine you conducted a conversation with me over the course of a quarter. It's my thoughts. And you get the right to not listen to me the whole time. You can pick and choose what you want to listen to when you read it. But it's been very, very heartening. It's been a growing beast, and it's very helpful for me because it makes me think through. There's nothing that makes you think through what you think than having to write it down and circulate it to smart people.
Sure.
That challenge of having to write it down. If you think back to an exam, the main thing that you got out of an exam was the preparation. It wasn't the grade, it was the preparation that you had to think about what you were going to write on the exam. This is sort of the same way. Each quarter I take an exam and write it of my thoughts, but I have to actually try to think it through. And sometimes I change my mind over time, but it's made me think it through. And I'll give you a perfect example. Everybody has said that when interest rates rise, cap rates are going to rise. And, you've heard that everywhere, right? And for several years, 8 years, you've heard that. Well, I got writing about that. And if you look back to what I was saying maybe 8 years ago, I was one of those people. And then I started looking at data and I thought, doesn't seem to work that way. Interest rates were really low in 2009. Cap rates were really high. Interest rates were quite high in 2007. Cap rates were really quite low. And other examples, right? And I looked at the data as best I could. No relationship. But what I did find was a huge relationship between cap rates and the flow of lending, the amount of commercial mortgages growth, the growth in the amount of commercial mortgages outstanding. And that's what seemingly drives cap rates. Well, having to take a position made me look deeper. And in looking deeper and thinking deeper, and I continue to think about this issue, what I've kind of discovered is interest rates are not the determinant of cap rates. And if you look at the data, you don't see it. If you think back intuitively to episodes, you don't see it. What really determines cap rates are flow of funds. And when you had huge flow of funds, and I'll take the example of 2007, cap rates got low. And when you had no flow of funds in 2009, cap rates got really high. And it didn't matter what else was going on. It was all about the flow of funds.
So when funding
therefore, what it's done is made me focus and try to get people focused more on watch the flow of funds rather than the interest rate.
So when funds are readily available, which goes kind of back to the conversation we were having a few minutes ago, now that you have all this alternate finance available and there's such a large flow of funds coming into real estate, both residential and commercial, it's allowing operators both on the mom and pop level all the way up to the institutional level get access to more funds, which means they're buying properties more readily. They're buying them at higher prices, which is pushing cap rates lower. That seems to make just common logical sense.
Yep, it's the money's got to go somewhere, right? And when I tell people that, they go, "Oh yeah," and that does seem to make sense. So anyway, that's a good example. It's been very heartening, and it's helped my thinking. I think it's helped others' thinking, and it's a good challenge, and it's something we enjoy doing.
Fantastic. So for all of my listeners, absolutely, you can look up Dr. Peter Linneman and the Linneman Letter online. You can opt in and subscribe to the Linneman Letter, and you'll hear his quarterly thoughts, which we're getting some of those live on this call. Doctor, just a couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. But I was interested to hear your take on the recent tax bill, the change that was just passed. Obviously there were some advantages and disadvantages for real estate in there. And as you're writing this next quarterly, your thoughts, I'm sure you're going to have some take on the tax bill. What's on your mind when it comes to the tax bill and how that's going to affect our economy and real estate?
So let's take the effect directly on real estate. They're fairly nuanced, and in general are not going to change the playing field a lot. Is the simple summary of the taxation part of real estate. You can find little examples of, the fact that very high-end homes can't deduct as much interest might be slightly beneficial for very high-end apartments, but not the run-of-the-mill apartments and such. So, but that's the summary on the tax bill. If you then go, how will it affect real estate more broadly? It will stimulate, by the best estimates I've seen, show about 110 basis points of additional GDP growth a year, coming from, very simply, lower corporate taxes compared to the rest of the world, and which will attract capital, will make us a more attractive place to expand. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it will make business activities more attractive. It will also, by reducing tax rates, make investing and earning profits more attractive, making risk-taking more attractive, and that drives growth in the economy. And then the other side is, by reducing individual tax rates, what you've done is say money that would otherwise be sitting in the hands of the government, deciding on what to do with it, you get to decide what to do with it. So the money exists either way. You get to decide what to do with it. History tends to show that you're more efficient in terms of generating growth when you make decisions on what to do with your money than the government is. So if you say about 1% more of your income will be in your control, if you generate it sort of 50% more efficiently than the government would in terms of generating growth, that's a big stimulus.
Sure.
And by the way, you say, well, why? If you think about it, the government's objective has to do with political objectives and redistribution objectives when they have the money. It's not good or bad. It's just factually true. That's the political's objectives, is paying off political debts and redistributing the money. When you have the money, that is not your objective. Your objective is, how do I make my life better? And that's where the additional growth comes from, the lower tax rates on individuals. That's going to stimulate the economy, and I think give this recovery extra legs beyond what it would have had. It's not about stimulus. Some people have said it's a stimulus package. It's not a stimulus package. It's a package about making the U.S. economy more robust and getting back to 3% growth. It's not per chance that we've had below 3% growth in a period of very high regulation, in a period where our taxes did not go up, but they didn't go down, while the West of the world did go down. and in a period where we had huge regulatory interventions. And you can say all the regulatory interventions done by the Fed and by the Obama administration were good. That's a separate issue, whether they were good or bad. They did slow growth. And if you think about regulations, there's been an enormous pullback in regulations that will continue. And if you think about it, I'm not talking about if the regulations are good or bad. That's a very micro decision on each regulation. But every regulation takes money out of growth and into lobbying and compliance.
Sure.
And when you have less regulation, you have less money going into lobbying and compliance. And that money goes into other things that stimulate growth. And so as the pendulum has swung to lower taxes, less regulatory intervention, less Fed intervention, you're going to see the economy pick up growth. You're going to see above 3% growth. Again, I've been saying for 8 years that if we did this, we would get above 3% growth. That's going to spur demand for real estate, and you're going to boost NOIs more than you would have without those factors. Supply is in pretty good shape. You can find markets that are overbuilt, but you can also find markets that are underbuilt. So, for example, in apartments, you can go to core urban apartments, and it's probably overbuilt in most markets in the near term because everybody got their entitlements 7 years ago, and they all came online at the same time. I think that will balance out. But if you find urban core product overbuilt right now in apartments, you can find most suburban markets are slightly underbuilt. So if you go across, supply's in pretty good shape. You're going to get a demand jolt. Interest rates going up are actually going to spur the economy a bit. Regulatory reduction and tax reduction is going to spur the economy. And I think it's actually a pretty good looking period for the next couple of years from a supply-demand point of view.
Fantastic. Love that take. Thank you for that. Sort of a one-off question as we head towards home here. What are your thoughts on the senior housing market? I have a lot of my members and subscribers are really starting to look more at senior housing, assisted living, 55 and over, memory care, the silver wave, they're calling it, of all the baby boomers.
Right.
Seems like there's a tremendous opportunity there, but there's also seems to be a tremendous amount of consolidation between larger players in that market. And if you have any thoughts on how sort of the smaller or intermediate players can, where are the opportunities for those folks?
Well, it is a pretty micro product. These are not products, and therefore there's always room for the entrepreneur, whether you have one product or 7 sites or 12 sites. It's a pretty micro product. It's not the kind of, you don't build a 1 million square foot facility like you would an office building or a shopping center. It's very micro. And that tends to keep the bigger guys somewhat out of it. The bigger facilities are the ones they tend to focus on in the more major markets. Lots of opportunities in smaller, more niche markets, secondary, tertiary markets. I think the number, I'm doing this off the top of my head, 80% of people retire within 10 miles or 20 miles of where they were living before they retired. Yes, there's a push to Florida, and yes, there's a push to Arizona and so forth, but most people are going to retire, or when I say retire, go to senior housing near where they're currently living, unless their kids have moved way far away, and as they get more ambulatory, will move there. The biggest danger in senior housing right now is the mythology that the baby boom is ready to move in. And it's just not true. The lead edge of the baby boom, this is simple math, the lead edge of the baby boom is 70. The general view is that people don't tend to move into senior housing until around the age of 77. That means that the baby boom is going to get there, but not until about 7 years from now. Now, when they get there, it's going to be a big spurt. But in the meantime, if you just do the math, who's coming into senior housing for the next 7 years? They're the people who were born between 1939 and 1946. Those were lean years because of the end of the Depression and World War II. Those were not big demographic years. So you're actually looking at pure demographics being quite lean for the next 7 years, and then the big spurt gets there.
Sure.
And I just caution people to understand that. The baby boom will get there, but by the time they get there, if you build today, by the time they get there, you're going to have a 7 to 10-year-old independent living facility trying to compete with somebody coming online with a new one. So just kind of,
sure.
I like the sector, but that simple mathematic demographic, this is another good example of what Linneman Letter made me think through as I go backwards on the birth ages. But if you do, you say, who's turned 77 over the next several years? They're people born 39 to 46. And then you start getting the front end of the boom moving through. So I like it as a sector. It's a real sector. It has a lot of niche opportunities. But be realistic about the math is what I'd say.
That's fantastic. I really appreciate that because a number of our investors and people that we work with and consult with, that's something that they're keeping a very, very fine eye on. And it's interesting. Everyone keeps talking about this, it's coming. But when I read the real math, there's a tremendous amount of vacancy. There's, a lot of people are building senior housing with the idea of getting private pay, but only 20 to 22%, 23% is private pay. The rest of it's Medicare and Medicaid paid. So the cap rates are lower, the NOIs are lower. It's really not, the math just doesn't add up. That's why I wanted to get your take on it.
It's tough math, and it's going to continue to be tough math for another, not impossible math. Obviously, it's a very niche exercise, but it's a tough math. It's going to continue to be a tough math for another 7 years. And then the real question is what happens to government pay when the baby boom finally gets there? And in an odd way, that's what you're betting on in some sense now. And in a way, you might want to wait and get a little closer to that answer before you make the decision.
Yep, absolutely. So last question, Peter, and which is, I love this part about your passion. We always, in my own life, love to give back. We've had a tremendous amount of success, as have you had. And we love to give back to the market, give back to the world, give back to our community. You're very passionate about your education foundation, Save a Mind, Give a Choice. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing there. Love to hear more about that.
Well, I was an educator all my life. I was a blue-collar kid, and out of 5 children, only 2 of us went to university, and I was fortunate enough to get a PhD, and it served me well in my life. And we've supported scholarships at some American universities and some children in disadvantaged situations in the U.S., but I stumbled into a situation about 15 years ago in rural Kenya with children of absolute destitute conditions, many of them orphans. And we began a program called Save a Mind, Give a Choice, where very micro, we will pick a child with some promise. We generally bring them in somewhere between the age of 8 and 14. And our promise to them is as long as they do well in their schooling, we'll provide everything they need to go to grade school, high school, university, and including clothes, and if they need a computer, and including emotional support and advice and clothes and books and food and so we have graduated over the years, about 65 students who we put all the way through and ended up graduating university in Kenya in all types of fields: medicine, nursing, engineering, conservation, hospitality. We have 140 children in the program now, ranging the youngest is 7. and the oldest is in graduate school. And we put them through. It's very rewarding. We put them in private schools or in government magnet schools where we get to provide their life support. I go over, we spend time with them, I write them. In fact, as I look at my computer screen right now, I've got about 9 messages from my students that I've received as emails this morning.
Wow.
It's just kind of the normal traffic I get. Nothing big, but little things like, how are you feeling? Because I had a medical procedure last week, and gee, I saw the Eagles won. What was that like? And just little things like you have a thrill. And so we have, this is a real passion. It's very micro. 140 children is not going to change the world, but it might change 140 lives.
Sure.
And we have one of our children was an orphan that we brought into the program when she was 8, and she's now a sophomore at Temple University in the United States, majoring in business and real estate.
Wow.
And so that's the only one we have in the U.S. All the others are in Kenya, but dreams can come true if you help them a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's not to say everyone is a miracle, but every one of them is pretty amazing in their own way. And my wife and I support it with some help from friends, and anybody who's interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to tell you more. And if you ever want to go to Kenya, let me know. And I go every year in August for about 10 days. So, but thank you for bringing it up. It means a lot, and it really is a passion for us. And in fact, I'm meeting with one of the education officers at noon today. So, yeah, it's a big thing for us.
Fantastic. I love that. That's I think a big part of rounding out a successful career is just giving back. And I think people don't have to wait until they have a successful career to give back. Even small successes in our lives, whether they're financial successes or emotional or relationship successes, giving back, I think, is a critical component to having a full, complete, robust life. So just as we close.
I would totally agree, and I'd only add one thing, is that when I started, I thought I was the giver. And as I sit here 15 years later, I realize I was the receiver.
Sure.
of it all. And I think that's part of what you mean, is that you often think you're the giver and you end up being the recipient. I've learned so much and benefited so much from interacting with these kids.
That is fantastic. So, Peter, if anybody wanted to reach out to you, whether it's about your foundation or about the Linneman Letter, is there a website they should visit or an email that we want to give out? What's the best way for people to reach
the www.linneman, Linneman, associates.com. LinnemanAssociates.com, and that has connections to everything. And I think the connection to our Facebook page and so forth is on there. And love to have it. And if I can ever help, it gives you how you can give me an email, and I'm pretty good at answering. So
fantastic.
I appreciate your hosting this and giving me the opportunity. I look forward to seeing your friends and clients in a couple of months. I think about 2 months or so.
That's right. That's right. We go live in about 2 months. So for those of you who are very interested in coming and learning and meeting myself and my team of coaches and consultants, as well as our keynote speakers, which is Dr. Peter Linneman, who you're hearing from today, is going to be our keynote speaker Friday night. And then Kevin Harrington, who is one of the original sharks from Shark Tank, and is responsible for bringing over 20 companies to $100 million of sales revenue, is going to be our keynote speaker Saturday night to talk about real estate, of course, finance, entrepreneurship, and of course, how to be a successful, profitable real estate investor. You can check that all out at flippinfun.com. So if you've enjoyed today's interview, and if you find us, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's on our blog, whether it's on iTunes in our podcast, leave us a comment, leave us a review, leave us a rating. Let us know how we did. If you have a question, leave it right beneath the video or the podcast. We'll answer that live and get back to you. Hopefully we'll see all of you at the Flippin' Fun Summit, flippinfun.com/Peter. Peter, thanks again. Thanks so much for spending some time with us. I know you're headed out of the country for the next couple weeks, so have a great trip and be safe.
Thank you very kindly. See you soon.
All right, guys,
Bye-bye.
Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.